Well, from what I'm seeing, it's pretty much 6:30 on the clock that I'm looking at. So I suppose we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask for the roll to be called, please.
King, Marsh,
Here.
Patterson, Petrie,
Present.
Furtado, Goss,
Present.
Esri.
Here, and Stephanie just had to go out. She said to make a phone call related to some business that she had to do. She'll be back hopefully not too long. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Petrie. Anything anybody needs to correct or add or delete? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, that passes. Move on, item 4, approval of minutes from the ELEC committee meeting for March 8th, 2018. Moved by Ms. Petrie. Seconded by Mr. Marsh. Is there any additions or corrections to be made to those? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. We'll move on then to public participation. We only have the one person tonight thus far signed up. Looks like probably the only person really here to speak to us, Mr. Barney Bryson. I'll start off by saying I apologize. We've been so busy, and it kind of even slipped my mind to get this on the agenda, but we are going to look into it, what you're going to speak to us about. Ask that you come to the seat there and turn the microphone on. It's the button farthest down on it. And for the record, state your name and your address, and then go ahead and tell us why you're here.
Okay, thank you. My name's Barney Bryson. I live at 2102 Barnes Street in Urbana. It's not in the city proper, but it is, I believe, an R2 regulated district just off of Brownfield Road. I'm in here tonight to ask you guys if you would look into a beekeeping situation. I've lived there for 20 years. My neighbor, and I like my neighbors. There's nothing wrong with them. It's their bees that I don't like and what their bees do. For several years, I protected the bees. I'd pull them out of the pool when they'd get in there. And then in the last 5 years, they've become extremely aggressive. I was going to try to open up a redwood hot tub I had, and there was a swarm of bees in there. They came out and got their bees because they've been helpful. But I had to get some foam and put in garbage bags to plug up where it opens and closes so they wouldn't get back in there. That wasn't that big of a deal. But I couldn't get my tub open on the day I had planned to do that. 4 or 5 years ago, well, that was 4 or 5 years ago. 3 years ago, there were 2 couples over at the house to help me open up the pool. We have a big cover to take off of it. I was out getting bleach to shock the pool. They had brought some bees in. They swarmed the back area, and the 2 couples that were there, one person out of each couple used EpiPens because they were allergic to bee stings, so they left. They haven't been back since. I do have some neighbors down the road that have a special needs daughter that I let her and their friends come over and swim in there, and she has a hard time with horseflies, but I'd hate to see the kid get stung by a bee, and then I'm sure they won't be back either. 2 years ago, my significant other, she was stung 3 times by bees, and then I started hearing about it. A year ago, I was stung 4 times, laying on my floaty sleeping. We weren't agitating the bees. I was in a very nice area of slumber, and I was woken with a burning in the back shoulder of my neck, and then I got hit on the back side and then in the back leg. She had been hit 3 times that year as well. Last year, Sue got stung 4 times. That was the same year that I was hit 3 times. And then when I was opening the pool, I was sweeping the pool. People had gone. We probably had about 300 to 400 bees on the cover because there's a mesh where the water is. Bees love water. They have to have water to make their honey. And I tried to get rid of the bees, and my brother came down to help me pull the cover off. We put long sleeve shirts on and got the cover off. Everybody left. I was vacuuming the pool, and there's a different feeling from the air of a fly when it lands on you than the power of a bee's wings. And there was what felt like to me bees landing on the back of my leg. When I slapped my leg, feet went up in the air. I went rear end first down in the pool, hit my leg on the side of the pool, had a hematoma about 4 inches long and 2 inches wide that I wound up having to get drained, costing about $300 to $400. I can't say it was a bee, but I can certainly tell you that the image of a bee is planted in your mind when something touches you after you've been woken up out of a sleep 2 or 3 times. This year, when I got in the truck earlier this year, I was going to go somewhere. I started to put my arm down on the truck, and there were on the arm inside by the window, and there was something there, and it was a bee. Fortunately, I was pulling out of the driveway and not going down the road. I don't get hysterical about it, but I don't particularly care for it either. Let's see. They've come back again this year. They're starting to swarm again. They're becoming very aggressive. Those are the health concerns out there and the nuisance from that. The other issues are what's called bee frass. Frass is their excrement. You can't get that off your windshield very easily. You can't get it off your car. You will rub through the clear coat and the paint trying to get that stuff off of there because it's good glue, but it doesn't come off very easily. And that is really annoying equally as well. I like my neighbors. The bees I don't care about. My understanding is that she's got something like 27 beehives in her yard. Her yard is I'd say less than half an acre. That doesn't count the neighbor that lives next door to her, so she's got a bunch in her garage and the other ones along the side of the garage. And she's put 4 more on my other neighbor's side to keep bees over there. I've done looking into some research on bees and beekeeping, and I'm going to bring that in and offer that to is it Mr. Peterson? And bring that in to kind of help out, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. But the other neighbors out there, the one has said that when grandma's grandkids get hit by the bee, then the dam will break on their side. Right now it's okay. The kids haven't been stung, but they don't fill their bird feeder anymore because they all come to the water and load up their yard. The guy that sold the house eventually, his family had been hit about 7 times. Took him about 1.5 years because when they saw the beehives back there, people didn't want to buy the property. It just so happens a firefighter guy bought it. He's not concerned about them, but I told him, I said, you cannot spray those bees. You can't, that's illegal. But there's some severe issues with it, and I certainly hope that you would look into it and see if, I'm not saying we have to get rid of all of them, but at least restrict it down to a common sense and manageable amount, because the count that I did, there's approximately 1 million bees in that area. And that's just way too many for a residential area, in my opinion. Thank you very much. If you have any questions,
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. It isn't typical, of course, during public participation, but we have been pretty lenient in this committee to ask questions. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bryson? Go ahead, Patsy.
I think when this comes before us, and as you work with Mr. Hall, I am somewhat aware, I'm not deeply aware, but somewhat aware that there are many varieties of bees, and I am wondering what the variety of these bees are, and is this a more aggressive variety, and if that can be determined, and if maybe that's a point in negotiation with your neighbor. I understand what you said, how many are there, but your descriptions seem to describe an aggressiveness of this these bees. And if that kind of information could be brought forth when it becomes an agenda item.
If I may, she has several different kinds of bees. She goes out and takes them from a place when they want to get rid of them. And that's where the big swarm came from. How they harvest them is with a shop vac. And then they bring the shop vac in a queen, they identify the queen and put her in a hive and open the shop vac up. And those bees are pretty upset. So they go all over the place. And it's just been like about the last 5 to 6 years they've become aggressive. It hasn't always been that way. She's had them there for quite a while. It's my opinion that the number has increased to a point that it's not sustainable in that small of an area. But I'm not really sure what kind they are. And I did read that sometimes if bees become aggressive, if you know which hive it is, you can remove the queen and introduce another queen in there, and that will calm the bees down. I mean, I've been trying to work with her on this like for the last several years, but it's not working. So
I appreciate the additional information you just shared. So my thought probably is moot, because if she's collecting swarms from different places, it would be very hard to know what type of bees they are, and they're probably very intermixed by now and things of that nature.
Did anybody else have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Appreciate it. Okay. Anybody else care to speak during public participation? Don't believe so. We'll close that then and move on to communications. Are there any communications? Seeing no communications, we will then move on to our action items. We have item 7 for information only. A, 2017 Champaign County MS4 Area Stormwater Survey results. Ms. Monty.
Hello. I have some visuals to talk with. So last year, in 2017, in April, actually I think it was March, we sent out a survey to Champaign County residents who lived within Champaign County MS4 area. So the MS4 area on this map is the yellow. The gray area is the urbanized area. So we looked at that, those yellow areas, which comprise the MS4 area, and identified environmental justice areas within the yellow areas based on criteria that is available. And so we limited our survey to a sample of residents in the environmental justice areas. We had a sample size of 350. We had approximately 4,000 qualifying parcels within the environmental justice area. And let me back up a minute and say the whole purpose of this survey was to identify citizens' concerns related to stormwater within that urbanized area, the gray area, the wider area. And this was done to meet a requirement by the MS4 NPDES annual report criteria. One of the best management practices requires us to reach out and do public involvement with regard to persons within the environmental justice areas within the MS4 area. So this is our means of satisfying that criterion. So as I mentioned, our sample size was 350. We ended up mailing about 450 surveys. We did no follow-up. It was just a mailing. And we received 68 survey responses. Our response rate then was 18%. And so for a mailing of a survey with no follow-up, a 10 to 15% response rate is considered somewhat average. So slightly above average results there. Now I'll just go through the 3 questions. And Our first question of the survey asked about whether the resident perceived any storm water drainage problems during or after a rain event. And roughly a third indicated that yes, they had. So, let's see, 26 respondents. Within the responses received, half of those problems were within the MS4 area, and the other half that were identified were not within the MS4 area, but within the urbanized area. And the types of problems reported, by far the most often reported type of problem was stormwater in the street that seemed to interfere with traffic during large rain events. And then another category of that was any rain event. But that was the most responses received in that category was for large rain events and stormwater in the street. Another subset of that was stormwater so deep that it may be a safety concern during large rain events. And that was another high response. Let me get back here. And then not so many responses were received. The least amount were stormwater that causes property damage to buildings during large rain events or any rain. So those were the three categories of responses received for that question, to give us an idea. I think the memorandum further breaks it down and talks about which of these occurred within the MS4 area, and I already talked about that. It was roughly half of the responses received. The next question asked about if those persons perceived any pollution of the stormwater, and again, within the wider urbanized area. That includes the MS4 area. And so about 81% of the respondents, 55 said no, they didn't notice any pollution. There were a couple of no responses, and then 10 respondents indicated yes, they had. So the most often type of stormwater drainage pollution problem mentioned was trash on the ground or in the street that may wash into the storm sewer system. Also, there was some notice of sanitary sewer overflowing onto the surface of the ground or emptying into a stream. That was a category response. Dumping of motor oil into a storm drain, and then one mention of farm field runoff. This was 10 persons checking all categories that applied. So this is how it broke out. Mention of yard waste, grass and leaves, and goose feces. So as I mentioned, some of these responses pertain to the urbanized area, and there are geese everywhere around Crystal Lake Park, for example, which is in that urbanized area. So the third question asked about recreation, and the question was, do you recreate at any location in the Champaign County MS4 area or urbanized area where water is a prominent feature? And so 73%, about 50 respondents said no, but 21%, about 14 said yes. So that was interesting. And by far the most popular type of recreation was walking, or is walking along or near the shore. Fishing is another that was remarked about 4 times. Some boating, some camping, wading, swimming, a kayak response. So that gives us an idea of what's going on out there, and it's not that surprising given that these are questions about prominent water areas. So the concerns of those persons responding to this question, the largest concern with five of the 10 respondents, I think it was 14, I'm sorry, other pollution in water that may harm myself or others who may come into contact with the pollution. So it was just something that looked like pollution, and they were concerned about coming into contact with it and not knowing if it was safe. Trash in the water that was unpleasant to see, and trash in the water causing pollution was another category of response. Other pollution visible that harms the quality of the aquatic environment for those concerned about that. And for those persons fishing, catching fish that may be unsafe to eat due to pollution, some bank or erosion on the shore that could harm the quality of aquatic environment, algae, and then again, geese feces, and drainage from fields, fertilizer. So that gives us a good idea of some of the concerns that are being experienced or perceived. And then other comments were included in the memorandum, and I'm not going to read through those. Essentially, it's a mishmash of observations by persons, some positive, some negative, and most of those extra comments had to do with the urbanized area. And then we asked persons to indicate the nearest street and intersection to their home. And so about 13 all but 21 responded to that question. 54 participants, 80% responded to that. And then we asked, as a sort of an educational question, for persons to indicate what their watershed was. And so we had provided this graphic to them in the survey. And so it was just a matter of identifying your location on the survey and understanding which watershed your location was in. And so it broke out like the respondents, 68 persons in our response. I should be more exact. There were some no response. Well, 21 people did not respond to this question about the watershed, but everyone else did. And this is how it broke out. And the upper Kaskaskia watershed, shown in green there, 37% of the respondents were from there. The Embera, 19%, and then the Vermilion, 10%. So that's how it broke out. And it's not surprising, there were no upper Sangamon watershed parcels, so nobody responded from there, and that's good. So that's how it looked. The middle Wabash, too, is all the way down. If I back up, you'll see that's all the way down to the southeast portion of the county, so no parcels there either. So everything's came back the way it should come back with regard to that. That was an educational kind of outreach question, and so that was that. And we did get some persons interested in knowing about this report and tracking what the county does about this, and so they were notified about this meeting. I don't know if anyone here from the audience is here because of that, but they all received notification. I think that is pretty much this. This is our pilot survey, and if we do go ahead and do this again, we would use this as a baseline kind of response and then note or track any kind of additional kind of observations that come in or different trends. So any questions, I would be happy to take those.
Questions? Go ahead, John.
I just want to make clear to the committee, we didn't do this because we thought it was just a great idea. We did this because EPA requires us to do this as part of the MS4 program. It turns out that almost all of your MS4 jurisdiction is some kind of environmental justice area. And so while this survey wasn't cheap, you actually surveyed almost your complete MS4 population. I don't know how many other locales in the state did that, but that is an accomplishment. It is reported in the annual report that you have on your desk tonight. Also in that annual report, Susan and Kate have identified, actually there were some changes in the environmental justice areas from last year to this year, and EPA doesn't say we only have to contact environmental justice areas once in the 5-year lifetime of the permit. It's written as something we have to do every year. I would hope they would modify that in the future. I don't see a need to do the same survey every year, but there's nothing indicating that isn't required. So Susan is gearing up to do that again this year. And so these are some of the new items that were added in 2016. I mean, really, in terms of how much effort we put into the MS4 program every year, this is a lot of the effort right here. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. We'll get a new state permit in 2020 that may revise that. That would be one thing I hope to suggest to EPA, is provide a little bit more guidance on whether we're really supposed to do this every year or every other year, every third year, but it's not written that way right now.
John, I just want to add that this is one of 6 of the best management practices categories. It blends in with the others, which include, answering some of these questions and reaching out to people and tracking any kind of pollution ourselves and mapping. So we're doing all of the other kind of things as well, as in addition to this.
Okay. Ms. Petrie.
As always, thank you so much for the work, Susan. Can we go back? I think it's the first or second slide, which is the map showing the areas that are within the MS4. Okay, there are areas that look like they're deeply within the urbanized area. Could you explain how that happens to occur?
Well, it's unincorporated areas, first of all, the yellow. And so you know how our corporate boundaries interact, and that's one explanation. The MS4 areas are based on density and population, census information. And so I don't know how else to answer that question. It is what it appears to be based on the data and criteria for MS4 areas.
Okay, so some of those obviously overlap with the municipalities. Then.
Nope,
They
they
don't?
don't. They don't.
Okay,
Well, you're looking at the graveyard on Pennsylvania Avenue. You're looking at the area around the Kraft plant, which is sort of in the left of, it says, right above West Church Street there. No, that's to the right. That's not Kraft. There's the Kraft plant right there.
Yeah.
So it's places like that. You got the Crystal Lake Park coming down. You got the railroad yard coming down, and various places like that. And there's also, I'm not sure what the one in the southeast corner is. I think that's a park of some sort. I'm not sure. Or just a field right now. So it's miscellaneous things.
This is the cemetery by the camp, the university.
okay,
So there's a variety of things.
all right. I appreciate that. And then to the question about identifying if the water is polluted, it seems to me that John Q. Public would have a terribly hard time determining if the water is polluted other than things they can see visually floating around
Yeah.
the areas. So is there a means of
Well,
checking?
we have some locations specified, and we actually, if we have time, we can actually, as part of our monitoring operation, we may visit some of these locations specified as pollution if they're in the county's MS4.
Okay, that would be good.
Yeah.
And then last, as I usually request that your PowerPoint slides be put up on the, as part of the packet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Patterson?
Kind of similar to what Patsy asked. Do you, in this survey, do you define, is the question asked plainly, like have you seen pollution, or is it give different categories, or is it like define what pollution?
It's check all that apply kind of question,
Okay.
and there's like 6, I think, the slides, which
Was
I
that,
have.
was that what was in one of the earlier
Yeah.
slides? Okay, I just want to clarify things.
They're like, check all that apply, and they're listed. Like, all of these choices are given. And more. Some were not checked by anyone. These are just ones that were checked.
Further comments, questions on this? Seeing none, thank you, Susan, for that. We'll then move on to B, Observer Report for the March 26th and April 30th, 2018 Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force meetings. Susan passed out a couple pages here stapled together. Go ahead, Ms. Monty, when you're ready.
So what you have in front of you is a copy of the IEPA webpage content about this task force. They've been meeting since February, and I wanted to just tell you a little bit about their strategy. So, first of all, their timeline has been, there's a Senate bill or a House bill, I'm not sure what it is, but thank you. Senate Bill 274 that is expected to pass and be approved to extend their deadline to December of 2018, December 31st, since their original deadline was July 1st of this year. And so then they organized, there's about 23 persons or so on this subcommittee, on the committee, and they formed 2 subcommittees initially, and they're calling that Stage 1 work. And they're going to focus on, one subcommittee will meet to identify potential and current contamination threats to the water quality of the Muhammad Aquifer. And the other one, the other task force, which is labeled, they're labeled A and B, that one will identify actions that need to be taken to ensure the long-term protection of the Muhammad Aquifer. So I have also information about the chairs and contacts of the committees and subcommittees. If you wanted to know those, you could look on the webpage. I believe that also would have it once the minutes are ready. But anyone who wants to know that, I could send an extra email to you with some of that information. So also, they're going to be in Stage 1, presumably through about September, where these 2 subcommittees will continue to meet, and the regular full task force will meet not quite as often as the subcommittees. The next meeting will, the May meeting of the regular committee has been canceled to allow for the subcommittees to do more work. And the next meeting of the subcommittees will be in Monticello on June 1st. And so, yeah, this webpage is very helpful to track the location of the meetings. And if the meetings are coming back to Brookings, we might contact you by email just to let you know of that opportunity to have a local chance to be in the audience for those meetings. They're well attended and very interesting if you have the time to listen to those.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I had Mr. Patterson first and then Mr. Marsh.
Is the website in the packet?
It's not. Pardon me?
Do you know what the website is?
It's on the, there's a link, yeah, if you don't have a hyperlink, access to the hyperlink, you can't get to it. If you just Google IEPA Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force, you'll get right to it.
Okay, thank you.
And I will send an email out with this link in case that's easy.
Mr. Marsh?
Just for my clarity, is this the same group that Chapin has added a couple people to, and they are looking at the issue regarding people's gas?
It is one of their primary focus points, and that is probably one of the first things they talked about.
Thank you.
Mr. Goss?
Yeah, I do know. I talked with Senator Rose on Saturday that his legislation actually made it out of the Senate and is stalled in the House. And he thought it had to be decided on this week whether they were going to get it out of the House. It had enough support that they've held it up in rules. So he was pretty frustrated when I talked to him on Saturday because everybody's kind of behind it, but it's lobby dollars have come from people's gas themselves. Have slowed this down. So.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thank you for that, Susan. We'll move on then to C, the e-guide for residents of Champaign County. And back to you, Susan.
I wanted you to all be aware that the e-waste collection for next Saturday really fills up fast. Within 10 days, it was fully booked, and we have to change the e-guide to let people know. The next registration will be on September 9th, and so I wanted you to be aware of that. We have pamphlets here and online at the Champaign County RRR webpage. And what else? That's about it.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, I did get a notice, and Brooks, maybe you did too, that Mohammed's doing an e-collection on the same day. I don't know whether they're planning to coordinate in there, but I did see that for folks that may be on that side of the county that live in Mohammed, that if they've inquired.
Wow, that's very interesting, because they also are supporting this collection. So maybe they came across another opportunity or something. I'm sort of curious about that. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, I think it came from area-wide disposal was kind of the lead people on that. So I apologize. I should have brought
No,
something with me.
Thank you for
I
mentioning
saw it
that.
and I'm already signed up, so I didn't worry about it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for mentioning that. That's curious.
Anything else on this? Okay, we'll move on then to D. We have award of land bank grant to Village of Rantoul. Mr. Hall.
Okay, you may recall last year, the Village of Rantoul was asking jurisdictions to support their application for a new grant program with the Illinois Housing Development Authority called the Land Bank Capacity Program. The county board had provided a letter of support in December. The village actually made a sizable request, $500,000. They did get awarded $150,000. And again, this can be used to establish a land bank, and then it can also be used for some of the property maintenance and disposal activities once the land bank gets up and running. So again, the way this was done, the Village of Rantoul will be putting up all the financial resources that will be reimbursed through the grant. We've had a couple of coordination meetings already, and I'll keep the committee informed of progress in that. Along that way, there's really not even a clear schedule at this point for doing the feasibility study, but that will be the first big undertaking. I know before we get too involved in the feasibility study, they're spending some time trying to see if the private sector has any interest of being involved in this from the beginning. And so, again, this is being done predominantly by Village of Rantoul, with holding coordination meetings with any other jurisdiction that's interested at this point. That's the county, City of Urbana, City of Champaign. They had actually letters of support from even Village of Mahomet, I believe even the Mass Transit District. So they're trying to take a big shot approach to this, and we'll keep you informed as it progresses.
Ms. Petrie.
Just a bit of clarification. 150,000 is a wonderful award for Rantoul, but that doesn't go very far. So can you help us better appreciate at least what they're talking about in establishing a feasibility study? What are their goals? What are they trying to target to land bank?
Well, the end product of the feasibility study is really a business plan for how the land bank will operate. The intent is to have the land bank be self-sustaining. No government wants to, add a new draw on its resources. And so I'm dying to see how a land bank could be self-sustaining. And I'm even more interested in how the land bank is going to serve, you know, the varied interest. The village of Rantoul has its own serious concerns with abandoned properties. The city of Champaign, city of Urbana, they both have their concerns. The county certainly has its concerns. Well, the 150,000 is really only to get it up.
Well, I understand that, but.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. There's lots of questions to ask at this point. Unfortunately, I don't really have any answers.
But you will be involved in this feasibility study process? Okay.
Further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll move on then to E, notice of noncompliance with Illinois noxious weed law. Mr. Hall.
This is the second year in a row the state has sent out these notices of noncompliance. Last year, I think every county but one got a notice of noncompliance. I believe Williamson County is the only county that the Department of Ag considers to be meeting the requirements of the Noxious Weed Act. I can't imagine anyway. I have no idea how much it would cost for Champaign County to meet the written requirements of the Noxious Weed Act, but you would have to have a plan every year for the control of all noxious weeds in the county, and that has to be submitted to the state, and that's how they know you're in compliance every year. The county doesn't even have an official weed superintendent. I respond to any complaints. I'm happy to say that every landowner I've ever contacted has done what we asked. So that's a very cost-effective program, but I do know that we have not contacted every landowner who has noxious weeds. I think. Can we get you a backpack spray? Only if you get me the proper training. So anyhow, I don't want you to get concerned about this. I think I checked, and I think it's a petty offense, each violation.
Sounds like a petty.
So, you know, it's a good thing it's no worse than that. And again, we follow up on all complaints, and so far, every landowner has responded. So, oddly enough, it's one of our more successful programs.
So this is just weeds, not like invasive species?
No, these are noxious weeds. And that's like, there's a list of 10.
Any further discussion on this, Mr. Patterson?
Is there any consequence besides hurt feelings?
Not that I know of.
Anything else? Going once? Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to F. Public notice of renewal of Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, IEPA, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, permit for U of I Special Materials Storage Facility located at 2006 Griffith Drive, Champaign. Mr. Hall.
This is just an FYI for those board members who might be interested in this.
Any discussion on this? Seeing none, then we'll move on then to line 8, items to be approved by ELUC. We have A, the Recreation and Entertainment License for Eastern Illinois Abate Incorporated for live bands and motorcycle rodeo, Rolling Hills Campground, 3151A, County Road 2800 East, Penfield, for June 1st through 3rd, 2018. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Petrie. Discussion on this, or do you want to say anything, Mr. Hall? It's pretty standard, I believe.
This is just an annual license renewal. The sheriff's office has signed off on it already.
And yeah, this, I don't know how many years they've done this, and Abate's done they do more than one a year, if I remember, don't they? Or is it usually just one? Okay. but just the one. Okay. It just, I guess I've seen it enough that it maybe seems like they do more than one a year, the abate come through. Mr. Patterson.
Does the sheriff's office use a certain criteria, or is it just like a general up or down?
Well, they make sure there's no outstanding, problems. There's no background checks for these R&E licenses, but, and I would report if we get any complaints. We have had some in the past, not abate, but every now and then you will have a problem R&E license, but we never had any complaints about the abate events.
Okay, thanks.
Is anything else before we move on? Okay, that's approved. We'll then move on then to, oh, sorry. I guess assuming it's going to pass. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. Nope, no nays. So, thank you. Now it passes. Yes, I am jumping the gun there. Those are usually pretty routine, but that is correct. We need to truly vote on it. Now we'll go to 9. Items to be recommended to the county board. A, subdivision case 200-18, Lenahan Acre subdivision, final plat approval of a one-lot minor subdivision for an existing house located in the northwest quarter of Section 2 of Township 17 North, Range 9 East of the 3rd Principal Meridian in Crittenden Township, and known as the house located at 596 County Road 1600 East, Philo, Illinois. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Furtado. I'll note that we have Mr. Hartkey and I believe one of his employees, the surveyor, I would maybe assume, in the audience to answer any questions about this that they might be able to answer if we desire to ask them. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Patterson.
I guess just for basic, I mean, are we basically looking at where it's like farmland that's going to be turned into a plot for residents?
No, this is an existing farmstead, and so they're cutting it off from the farmland, but they're taking no land out of production.
Further discussion or questions? Mr. Marsh.
What's the purpose of separating it?
So they can sell it. Sell it in compliance with, all subdivision ordinance.
She said like the nursing home, like the nursing home. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll then move on then to B, proposed minor amendments to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. We're placing these on a 30-day review beginning on March 8th. That's right, they were placed on review. They're back. Long day already, I guess. They were placed on the 30-day review on March 8th, that's right, and so they're back to us. Is there such a motion to approve these? Moved by Ms. Petrie. Seconded by Mr. Marsh. Discussion on these. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Hear no nays, but yes, Ms. Petrie.
I request that A and B not be on the consent agenda for the county board meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we can do that. We'll then move on then to C, resolution accepting the Illinois Housing Development Agency's Abandoned Properties Program Grant. Is there a motion for this? Moved by Mr. Marsh, seconded by Ms. Petrie. Discussion on this, or do you want to say anything to this, Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was a memo attached to this, but the county had requested a grant of $85,000 with $13,000 of local match. We did not get that, but we did get $40,000, and that should be enough to do about 4 of the properties that we have to do. You may have noticed 504 South Dodson was cleaned up this week, and that was a project that had been authorized, I think even before we applied for the grant, but it can be reimbursed by this grant. Other things that will be reimbursed by this grant is to maintain the properties that we do have. 504 South Dodson will need to be maintained starting in about a month. It'll have to be mowed. The property at 1101 Carroll Avenue will have to be mowed. Last year, Dana Brenner was good enough to take care of those properties, but now that we have the grant that will pay for that, I'll be talking to Dana to see if, I'm assuming he would like us to find someone to maintain that on a, once a month basis rather than send his staff out. But if he does send his staff out, we could get those costs reimbursed.
You got $20, I know some college kids.
Yeah, I don't know how much freedom we have on hiring contractors, but we've talked to several contractors already that, this is their business and they're just not interested in it. So I may need some college kids. Anyhow, I think this is good news. Obviously, we now have a new quarterly reporting requirement for this grant, but that's okay. It'll help us take care of some of these properties.
Ms. Furtado?
So just to a question and a comment, is our match then like prorated down to $6,000 or whatever?
No, we have no match with this. This is all grant
Oh,
money.
okay, fantastic. And then, secondly, congratulations on all the grant work that y'all are doing. I think it's important and proactive, and I really appreciate the work.
Susan Bergstrom is our grant specialist. She brings that skill from the RPC, and it was used a lot this year.
As someone who did that job for 6 years, I understand all the work that goes into these environmental grants, and I appreciate the work.
Thank you.
Further discussion, comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We will then move on to D, Annual Facility Inspection Report for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4, Stormwater Discharge Permit with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, IEPA, for the period 4/1/17 through 3/31/18. Do you want to speak to this first, John? Or?
Sure. I handed this out tonight. I apologize for not having this ready for the agenda. These reports are always a huge undertaking, and I've never gotten one yet as part of the agenda. Hopefully, we'll do better next year. The one that's in front of you has only one last update that needs to be done, and that is the spill response training. This would be added to Table 6 on page 8 and also to Attachment B on page B8. And we don't have that information simply because I waited too late to contact John Dwyer. That information will be added to this report by the time it goes to the county board. We didn't get everything done this year we were supposed to get done. Susan has 2 or 3 things on my desk. She's patiently waiting for my replies. And so hopefully in next year's report, there'll be even more things done. And we do the best we can on the MS4 program every year. These reports, each year we do a little better job, so it's working out so far. So I hope you can recommend this.
And these need to be to the state by
June 1.
1, yeah. Questions, comments on this, or is there a motion? Or-
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Ms. Furtado, seconded by Ms. Petrie, and then go ahead, Stephanie.
I mean, I just wanted to comment. I know you said you didn't get everything done that you wanted to get done, but just looking through this, the number of things that are in the complete category is impressive. So congrats on that.
And this is something that the county did not do prior to 2003. And we didn't do very well from 2003 to 2011. So this is it's been a big change in the operations of our department, and I was happy last year when the county board gave us a new position to help get this done. And I'm really looking forward to getting that new staff person fully integrated this year, so that hopefully the agenda will be part of the report will be part of the agenda next year, so. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, sorry, just the spelling police on page 11. It jumped off the page, sorry. That's what I mean. Down in Urbana Township, it says Strum Sewer instead of Storm Sewer.
Thank you. We can never have enough spelling police. And grammar police are very welcomed also.
Further discussion on this? I know we haven't had a long period of time to look through it by any means.
And if any board member has a question on this between now and the county board, let me know. We'll follow up
We can
on it.
we can always approve it and keep it off the consent, as has already been done with 2 of them. Or approve it and pull it off with only 1 person asking to at the full county board to discuss it some more. Go ahead.
A technical question, should it be off consent since he does have some parts to add to it? Would that be more appropriate?
Makes sense to me that we can forward it without, yeah. So I have no problem with that. Yeah, and seconded by Ms. Petrie. So is there any further discussion on this? Are we ready to vote? So we're voting with the knowledge that we're going to keep it off the consent. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Okay, we were then to E, closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120-2C6 to consider the setting of a price for lease or sale of property owned by Champaign. Should it be Champaign County?
Yes.
Is there such a motion?
Yes, I have the motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we enter into closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 parentheses C6 to discuss the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by Champaign County. I further move that the following individuals remain present: Director of Planning and Zoning and the Recording Secretary.
Is there a second? Second to Mr. Goss. We'll take a roll, I believe. We'll take a roll call and then we'll, if no one else is in the room, I don't suppose we need to move, or would you rather? Well, yeah, that's right. We'll leave that on then. So if you call the roll then, please, Tammy, when you get ready.
Goss,
Yes.
Furtado,
Here.
King, Marsh,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Petrie,
Yes.
Esri.
Yes. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move over. I hadn't thought about the camera system. Okay. We'll go back into open session, open meeting. We're all here again, minus Mr. Weibel, but that's fine. Let's see, we'll move on then to other business. Is there any other business? Ms.
I
Furtado.
just have a update question. Where are we on the wind farm?
Or solar farm, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, solar farm, apologize, solar farm
The public
process.
hearing is still going on at the ZBA. That's been continued to June 14th. And whether the ZBA completes that on June 14th or June 28th, I'm pretty confident it will be in front of you at your July meeting, and then again in August. So,
Thank you.
I was hopeful that it might be on this agenda, but it was too much to do, so.
Go ahead, Patsy.
The ZBA is scheduled to meet next Thursday, but it'll be on other topics. Is that accurate? Thank you.
Any other business? Okay, I have no chair's report. And for designation of items to be placed on consent agenda, I would have 9C as the only one.
Does the property sale go on consent?
Not, I wouldn't think we'd put that on consent. I wouldn't put that on consent at this point. I don't think it really is either. Yeah, that's true. Well, in the straw, can't vote, but it wasn't a unanimous straw poll, and yeah, being a closed session, I don't think it's really correct anyway. Discussed in the open, yeah. So so John agrees then just 9C would be the only item on the consent agenda. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Marsh. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.